Chapter 7, Photosynthesis, and how that utilizes light to make food for photosynthetic organisms. So let's look at the basics of photosynthesis. It is a process that occurs within photosynthetic organisms like plants, algae, which is the name given to photosynthetic protists. And if you remember, the protists are those things that are found mostly in fresh water, salt water as well. Most of them are single-celled, but there are some really large multicellular algae. And then some bacteria can photosynthesize as well. So here's an example of some protists in water zipping around. Notice that they're green. And then here's a large multicellular protist, the algae, the seaweeds, which is a type of algae. Multicellular, here's a pretty large fish for scale. And some of the seaweed or kelp can get to be tens of feet tall. Like if you've ever been to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, all that seaweed, kelp, that's a type of algae. They're plant-like in structure, but they're actually protists. So what occurs with photosynthesis is the transformation of light energy from the sun into the chemical bond energy of sugars initially. And then the sugars can get converted into other biological molecules by the photosynthetic organisms themselves. And the starting material, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere or in water, and then water itself. One waste product or byproduct is oxygen gas. So the chemical energy produced by the photosynthetic organisms through the process of photosynthesis, that energy from sunlight is converted into the chemical bond energy of sugar molecules initially. And then again, the photosynthetic organisms can convert the sugar, the carbohydrates, into the other biological molecules they may need, such as proteins and lipids. So, where's my cursor? Here we go. So the photosynthetic organisms are called autotrophs. Auto meaning self, and troph referring to nutrition or eating or food. So these are the self-feeding organisms. They make their own organic molecules through photosynthesis. The photoautotrophs are the specific self-feeding organisms that make the organic molecules by photosynthesis. So plants and other organisms, right, that use photosynthesis, capturing sunlight energy, they are the photoautotrophs, and they are the producers in most ecosystems. So let's look at where photosynthesis occurs. It occurs within cells of photoautotrophs, and if we just say autotrophs, that's fine. Within the specific organelles, the little green ones here that we see, called chloroplasts. So here's one chloroplast, one of these little round green spheres. And we'll look inside and see that there's some complex structures inside, and especially where photosynthesis is occurring in the sense of converting sunlight energy into the chemical energy bonds, into the chemical energy of carbohydrates, sugars. Excuse me. So the chloroplasts, right? These are these organelles that absorb light, converted into sugars, meaning through photosynthesis, and they're found in the cells of leaves of plants, for example. And these are the cells. Notice they're kind of brick-like in structure. That's because they have that nice rigid external cell wall. Typical plant cell. So there's a pigment that actually looks green to our eyes, and that's a chlorophyll pigment. There's a couple of different chlorophylls, but we'll start out with just chlorophyll. So it's a green pigment. It's a light-absorbing molecule. So a pigment is a molecule that can absorb light energy, and the chlorophyll molecules are within the chloroplasts, and they play the critical essential role in converting solar energy into the chemical energy of the bonds of carbohydrates initially. So the reason the chloroplasts look green or are green. And the reason the plant cells are green, the reason leaves are green, is because they're full, or they have an abundant amount of chlorophylls. Or at this point, we'll say chlorophyll, which is the light absorbing chemical pigment, and it happens to be green. So the way that photosynthesis occurs in leaves, which are organs of plants, is that oxygen and carbon dioxide enter and leave via these small little openings, usually on the undersides of leaves, that are referred to as stomata, these little openings. And they can open and close. So when they are open, carbon dioxide can enter into the leaf structure and reach the cells that are full of chloroplasts with the pigment, chlorophylls, and oxygen can leave through the stomata as well. So here's a zoomed in picture, underside of a leaf, and this kind of interlocking jigsaw puzzle shaped structures are cells of the leaf, and then these little openings are the stomata. Okay, so there are membranes within the chloroplasts that form this elaborate framework where the reactions of photosynthesis occurs that we'll see inside the chloroplasts. Way too small to see here. We'll have to zoom in greatly. So here we go. Here's one chloroplast, one of these little green specks, little green circles here, or ovals. And you zoom in, there's a double membrane, and then there's this elaborate stacked structures. They're called grana plural, and each little kind of disc-like structure is a thylakoid, and there's spaces inside, and we'll look more carefully at where things are going within the chloroplasts in the sense of the processes, the steps of photosynthesis. So the chloroplast has an inner compartment filled with a fluid called a stroma. That's just the fluid environment within the chloroplast. And then the thylakoids are these interconnected little membranous sacs. And they're stacked up to form these little structures called, again, grana. Granum is a singular one. Okay? There you go. So, as I said, the granum, one of these stacked structures of thylakoids, kind of analogous to a little stack of coins. Okay? And then grana is plural. So that's the way the thylakoid membranes are arranged within the chloroplasts. Okay? So the chlorophyll molecules that capture the sunlight energy are within the thylakoid membranes, right? Kind of packed in there, which is again why these things look green, and why the entire chloroplast looks green and the entire leaf looks green. So let's look at the energy transformations that occur in photosynthesis. Okay, so look at the word photo for light energy, and synthesis is to produce or to make something. Sugars. So the overall equation for photosynthesis, the reactant starting molecules, carbon dioxide, CO2, water, H2O, and then the products, glucose or carbohydrates, right? C6H12O6, and waste gas, oxygen gas, O2. And then the 6 over here and the 6, and there's an imaginary 1 and a 6 over here. That's just to show the balanced equation. Don't worry about that too much. And what drives this, drives and provides the energy for the production of glucose is sunlight energy. So the products, again, are sugar and oxygen gas. The products are the resulting molecules of photosynthesis, and then glucose and oxygen gas are the starting materials for cellular respiration, where glucose gets broken down to produce ATP, and then the waste materials, the waste gas of cellular respiration is carbon dioxide. Okay, so continuing Here is a simplified diagram showing one chloroplast and just one granum, right? Stacks of thylakoid membrane here, where the first steps of photosynthesis occur. And then there's a cyclical process, Calvin cycle. Remember in cellular respiration, there's the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. So in photosynthesis, there's a Calvin cycle that ultimately produces the carbohydrates, the sugars. So the sunlight energy is the energy that drives this whole process. The sunlight energy is absorbed by the pigments, chlorophylls, which are arranged in the thylakoid membranes of the grana within the chloroplasts. So in cellular respiration, it's the energy from electrons from food digestion in the mitochondria that's used, that energy, to make ATP. Right? Remember that high energy molecule, ATP. In photosynthesis, electrons are energetically boosted up an energy hill. So in cellular respiration, it's the energetic fall of electrons that's used to produce ATP. In photosynthesis, electrons are energetically boosted up by the light that provides energy, right? The energy in sunlight. And then those amped up electrons, excuse me, are utilized to produce the sugars at the Calvin cycle that we'll look at. So photosynthesis occurs in 2 stages. Remember, cellular respiration had 3 stages: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle, and then electron transport chain. In photosynthesis, there's 2 basic stages or steps. One is the light reactions, which is shown on the left side of the diagram here. And it's called the light reactions because that's where sunlight energy is harnessed. So the chlorophylls, the light harnessing pigments, molecules in the thylakoid membranes, absorb sunlight energy. And that energy is converted to the chemical energy, excuse me, in ATP and electron carriers. Right? High energy electrons there, and then the high energy molecule in ATP. Water is broken apart, split apart, to provide the electrons. And by the way, the hydrogen's there, the protons. And then oxygen is given off as a byproduct. So that occurs in the first stage called the light reactions. A little video on that here. I'll get the volume up for you guys. We should be able to see all this in this section here. Let me start that over. Plants